I was to define Dominion, we've built Dominion on the premise of three pillars. The first pillar is we believe that Dominion is a boutique property development company that has focused and will continue to focus on the Australian housing crisis that we've unfortunately found ourselves in. The second pillar is that the assets that we create, the assets are high yielding, and in so doing, we've been able to attract quite a lucrative investor base for us. And these assets that we create are actually hold assets. They're not the traditional develop to sell, they're develop to hold, which then takes me to the third pillar, which is it's very much a hold asset for the tenants that we concentrate on. We concentrate on raising the experience of that tenant. And the reason that we focused on that is the tenant in staying in one of our assets, we believe if you raise the accommodation level, that tends to increase the likelihood of that tenant staying. And as you can appreciate, if you have a tenant staying for a longer time, the value of that asset goes up, and you're obviously creating a home for somebody that they actually want to be in and enjoy. In terms of the tenants' demographic, the way I always describe that is I look at it as a bell curve, and we look at that 27 to sort of 32-year-olds, young professional, sort of just about to leave home, wants to live on their own. And then on the latter side of that bell curve is the 55-year-old single. And unfortunately in Australia, we've found ourselves in a divorcee crisis. So if I was to summarize that, the tenants that we provide the solutions for are in that sort of early part of their career, also in the later part of life. And we've built the business based upon a solution to the housing crisis, a high-yielding asset for investors with a very, very strong experience for the tenants. So how did Dominion start? John and I started Dominion back in 2019. And the way that I always like to describe it is it was a meeting of minds, it was a meeting of values. And we saw a very specific problem in the market. And we saw an opportunity for the traditional legacy of developments to be disrupted. We do things a lot smarter and a lot faster. And at the end of the day, the problem that we are solving, we believe the purpose of Dominion is specifically to give a solution to the housing crisis that we're in. So Dominion started off the back of both of us realizing there's a much, much faster way to be able to get returns out of the real estate market. So when we started Dominion and we were beginning our journey, one of the first challenges that we came across was that of finance. Traditional development finance is incredibly constrained. And what John and I had to do was recognize that there were different ways, and that led us to being able to access private development finance. And from that moment onwards, that is when we really scaled the business. The core values that John and I bring to the business on a daily basis is we keep everything simple. We ensure that everything's getting done and there's an outcome. And everything that we do is wrapped around the overall purpose of the business. So the type of properties that Dominion brings to market, they're classed as 1B buildings. What that means is that there are 300 square meters of living space under roof. There are more than 5 but less than 12 people, and that we typically stay within 20 kilometers of the CBD. So Dominion's development process can be described really simply via a stacking strategy. The first phase of that stacking is that we acquire well, and we acquire properties that fit the mantra of what John and I construct. The second is it's a subdivision strategy, and we would take that original property and we subdivide into 1, 2, 3, or 4. Once we've subdivided, we then construct 1B buildings on each one of those newly acquired lots. And then what we're able to do is at that point of full tenanting, we've maximized the value of that asset. So we now have via multiple stacks created a very lucrative asset for the investor and owner. So our developable projects are located by 3 simple rules. The first is it has to fit the planning rules that we follow. The second, once we get a green light on the planning, it then has to fit very specific locations. And then third of all, which is the acid test, is it has to have an incredibly high return on cash for us to continue down the path of just selecting that property. So Dominion differentiates itself in 2 lean areas. The first area is that we are a strategy-first development entity, meaning that we go looking for very specific sites that fit our strategy. The second main differentiator is that we are a build-to-hold developer versus the traditional developer tends to be a build-to-sell. So the amenities that we concentrate on across all of our developments probably fall into 3 classifications. The first classification is it's all about convenience. All of our micro apartments are fully furnished with all bills included for the tenants, and fairly unusual in this marketplace. Secondly, we concentrate on sustainability. Every one of our properties has solar on the roofs. And third is that they're all tech-enabled. Example, they've all got smart tech lobs. So the best way to describe the success that we've seen is describing it in 2 frames. The first frame, from an investor's perspective, we've been able to take a site and maximize the square meterage rent that that property had been receiving by 8 times by the time we were finished. From a tenant's perspective, we've had feedback like there was a business analyst that we interviewed, and he had been in Australia for about 3.5 years, and he candidly said this was the best accommodation he had ever had in the 3 or 4 years that he was in Australia. So Dominion ensures quality through all of our processes in 3 ways. The first is at the acquisition stage, we have what I believe we're up to 29 quality checks that we run through. And as you can appreciate, on a monthly basis, we're seeing 500 plus sites, but we would probably end up with maybe 2 or 3 sites that fit our strategy. From a construction perspective, we're doing the same thing over and over and over. When we select a site, we already know what's going to be built on that site. And then when the construction is complete and we're bringing property managers in, we only work with subject matter experts that understand the space. So community feedback for Dominion is massive. The first thing, we only operate in suburbs that have vacancy rates that are under 1%. And currently in Australia, quite a few of those suburbs that fit that criteria. And then secondly, in terms of our actual development process, one of the most important things that John and I concentrate on is an engagement with all the neighbors that surround any of our development sites. And that's because we strongly believe in building relationships with individuals, given what we're constructing and with the end product being the tenant in mind. So getting involved with Dominion's super easy. At the end of the day, John and I built this business based upon solving a very specific problem. And we would encourage any like-minded investors that would want to get involved in solving this problem and being part of the impact is just reach out via any of our social channels or the website.
Yeah, my name is John. I'm the co-founder of Dominion, which is a boutique property development company based in Australia. Dominion is a property development company focused on smart, scalable solutions that ensure maximum returns for investors while ensuring maximum tenant experience. What does that mean? It breaks down into three pillars of problems that we see. One is, everyone would know, is a housing crisis in Australia. The second is investor returns, that people actually want to get good returns for the cash they invest. And the third is tenant experience. So we believe that tenant-focused asset, tenant experience will then lead to good tenants, which then leads to a awesome asset. Behind Dominion is two co-founders, Seamus and myself. We founded the business based on a larger opportunity to contribute to the housing crisis. It's fair to say that it started with us looking for what are the maximum returns that we could get from our own capital through the vehicle of properties. What inspired Seamus and I to start this business is essentially our own lessons learned with regards to investing for the highest returns that we could achieve. What that means is running into serviceability challenges, funding challenges, growing our portfolio ourselves. And then once we worked that all out, so we then recognized that it could contribute to a much bigger picture in terms of the housing crisis in Australia. So Seamus and I ran into a number of different challenges. First of all would have been serviceability challenges. You can only borrow a certain amount from the bank before they say that's enough. I would say that then led us to broader finance challenges. We're accessing funding for developments. And all in all, we were just not getting where we wanted to as fast as we wanted through the standard residential investing, commercial investing, and then we hit ultimately a ceiling where we couldn't go any faster without bringing something else to the table. And for us, that was development. Some of the core values that Seamus and I prioritize would be to keep it simple and predictable. So one of the first things we noticed is that development is made more complicated than it needs to be, more often than not. And the second thing is being tenant first. So we found that there's more focus on tenants. There's more focus on the investor than there was on the tenant experience. So that was a second thing. So yeah, getting the right balance between the two. And then the third thing was, I can't remember. The kind of properties that Dominion develops is a Class 1B building. So if you look at the National Construction Code, you'll see Class 1B buildings. Class 1A is a typical house, and Class 1B is geared more towards typically individual living. And so for us, it's anything from 5 to 12 different people under a 300 square meter of living space under one roof. And it's more geared towards the young professionals at one end of the spectrum, and then 55 plus, and that's for whatever life reasons that those people are living individually, independently. So our development process is super simple. We keep it the same thing over and over again. First stage is to find a property that is under market value that fits our strategy. We're looking from a strategy first perspective. We're not looking for a site and then to work out what goes on there. So we're buying under market typically, and we're then subdividing to increase the equity on that property. And then after the subdivision and that lifted equity, we're then building a Class 1B building. And that's essentially to put a maximum cash flow asset onto the land. To maximize investor returns. And from a tenant experience, we're also then maximizing the experience for them as individual tenants. We then refinance that and would then pass that on to a specific provider that understands the product type. That's really important. And that's the end-to-end process from finding the site all the way through to handover of a completed property. So think about it as a build to hold instead of a buy to hold strategy. The way that Dominion focuses on where we the way that Dominion focuses on the choice of development projects location-wise is based upon where is there a strong cash flow while also playing an equity market, so an equity growth market. There's a few different ways that we look at that. 3 main ones is location, commercials, and planning. What does that mean? It means that we're looking for what are the great typical investment areas for someone to be in. Where's the jobs? Where's the infrastructure for travel? Planning, we need to go where the wind's blowing and sail where the wind blows, is a saying I like to say, which is that if the councils don't want the type of development you're trying to create, go where the councils do want what you're trying to create. And then the last is the commercials. So we'll look at what is the rent in that area, what is the expected equity uplift for that area. Is it already going to make sense after stage 1, stage 2 of what we create? But by the time we've got to stage 5, it's absolutely an opportunity for an investor. What sets Dominion apart from other property developers is that we focus on simplicity, predictability, and a systemized approach to development. We only build Class 1B buildings, and we focus on a build to hold strategy as opposed to a build to sell strategy. So there's a lot of different amenities that we focus for our tenants, and we can break them down into a few different areas. One is convenience. So all bills are included and the properties come fully furnished. Someone can walk in with literally their suitcases and bed sheets and away they go. We focus on sustainability. So solar on the roofs is one of the things that we like to focus on as well from an energy perspective. And then the last is tech. We like to focus where we can, high-speed internet, keypads on the doors to ensure that, again, we're getting back to convenience for tenants. Yeah, so some of the success stories we've had from completed projects from a tenant perspective, we've got quite a few different stories. My favorite so far is an elderly lady who moved closer to where her husband was in a home. Unfortunately, a reason that she was living by herself. She was able to rent out her house for considerably more than what she was paying in rent. She actually didn't have a retirement plan in terms of cash flow, and she was instantly cash flow positive. Unfortunately, her husband wasn't around for too much longer, but she actually decided to stay because of just how convenient and easy it was to live in the apartment. And also, she was able to be cash flow positive by a considerable amount each week. So the way that Dominion ensures quality throughout the whole development process is to look at pre-development quality checks, during development quality checks, and post-development quality checks. What does that mean? It means that we do about 29 different checks before we even acquire a property. If it hasn't ticked all of those, then we're not buying a property. The during development means that we have third-party providers to ensure that every build stage through every builder is all consistent. And the third is to use providers that understand a 1B asset. So 1B is a very different product to manage than a 1A, a traditional house. And so we ensure that we use approved suppliers for that from a management perspective. And that's how we ensure quality throughout the whole process. The role of community feedback plays in our projects. First of all, is that the suburbs that we build in desperately need more homes. So we're focused on building more homes where they're needed. And second of all is relationships with neighbors, with any providers in those areas. So for us, like, construction is not a quiet thing to do. And so the better the relationships we can have with neighbors, the better the outcome overall is for everyone involved. So for any investors or partners that want to get involved with what we do and see the world through similar lenses, who want to get the maximum they can out of the vehicle at property from a building wealth perspective, while also wanting to contribute to maximizing tenant experience along the way, they're the kind of people we want to speak to. Reach out, website, social media, anything that you can, give us a shout. Okay, so if someone is a sophisticated property investor, well on their way with regards to building a portfolio of residential and/or commercial property, looking to go a bit faster, doesn't necessarily have the time to do the developments themselves, but wants the development upside, they're the kind of people that we can help. So reach out and partner with us. We can take you on that journey.
Hi, my name's Michael. I've always been interested in property and that whole environment. I was fortunate enough, had a business and fortunate enough to pick up property, both residential and industrial. A deal came up and I got into commercial as well, but that was sort of not active role, the sort of a passive role. I've done renovations on the residential house, on the residential properties. I liked working with I like the process. As a result, I wanted to do some development, and fortunately, through mutual friends, bumped into John of Dominion, and mentioned the process that they had in developing properties. So I undertook, after a short while, not too long, we got together and started the first property in Brisbane City in Acacia Ridge. It was a great process. We started off, of course I was apprehensive because I didn't know, I had known John, but I hadn't gone through any sort of business dealings with him. Through residential, I was doing renovations, and with the renovations, I enjoyed the process of construction, and it also boosted yields and gave return. And so from that, I thought, what more can I do? And development was the answer. I came across Dominion through mutual friends. I met John, and then through John, I met Seamus. I chose Dominion because I hadn't had experience in development, and I had done a few minor renovations on my own portfolio. And I realized that it was a complex operation to go through council and subdivision and groundwork and construction. And so after discussion with John, I thought I'd go with Dominion. The experience with Dominion has been a very easy one and pleasurable, and both the directors, John and Seamus, have been very other guys and have been very transparent from go to woe. We get the actual invoices from the consultants that we have to pay, and we pay everything is about, you know what everything is. The process from start to finish has been as quick as possible. I mean, there are obviously processes with compliant development that Brisbane City Council, which is the council that I've currently been working in, have taken. But I think the result has been efficient. The things that stood out about the whole process was the professionalism that was put into every stage. I mean, we not without our fun, but when the rubber hit the road, we got on with it. So we've got 4 projects happening at the moment, all completed. The first one was completed about 12 months ago in Brisbane City Council. In fact, they're all in Brisbane City Council. The second one is almost finished. It hasn't got OC yet, but getting there. The third one is just about to start. And the fourth one is a much bigger one, and we're doing earthworks at the moment. What I'm seeking in the long term is a good, solid capital growth with a constant cash flow. And fortunately, started our first project with Dominion about 4 years ago, and that was in Brisbane. And Brisbane has just taken off in terms of capital growth, but we're also getting the cash flow from our first completed project. Well, as I mentioned in the earlier previous question, we're building in Brisbane, so from a financial point of view, the investment has been really very successful. But even more successful is the investment in knowledge, where I started from a very limited knowledge of development, and then accelerated my knowledge through my desire to get involved with Dominion. And I've the knowledge I've gained has been a very valuable investment. My property investment experiences have all been in Sydney, or predominantly in Sydney. Haven't invested in Queensland at all. I wanted to go to a much more economic environment, and I thought Brisbane was it. And Dominion, as I mentioned earlier, has been a very good partner to go to Brisbane with. I'm generally a very cautious investor and like to do my research. So obviously I need to be ultimately confident to start the project. Then on initially starting the project, there was good communication and transparency. Then we had cameras set up from day one before even work had started on the site. So I could see visually that things were, or some days not, happening. Yeah. But most of the time you could see a progression of the development. Then afterwards, when I had the finished product, I was very satisfied. And through certain points in time, we went up there and walked the walk. Doing developments has always got its challenges, but the proof of the pudding is in the eating. And this is the fourth project that I'm involved with in Brisbane. So I'm prepared to take those challenges and work with them and work with Dominion. I recommend Dominion to people that have a bit of knowledge of property, not necessarily too much, and also want to take it to another level. But the first step is to take the longest journey takes the first step, and Dominion's certainly supportive. I would say to someone that considers working with Dominion and hasn't made the leap, just do it. To business owners and investors that want to get into development, I would advise them to get support in doing a development so that they gain the knowledge to move forward with that development without getting burnt. In a development, there are a lot of complex issues that one needs to know that I was not necessarily subjected to in doing just renovations. So it's a much more complicated scenario that would be beneficial with support. We had some funny experiences going up to Brisbane. It's all been, the field trips are really certainly a lot of fun.
Okay, cool. And who do you prefer working with, John or Seamus, and why?
No comment.